Contemplations before chanting. The Sangha is invited to come back to our breathing so that the collective energy of mindfulness can bring us together as an organism, flowing as a river with no more separation. Let the whole Sangha breathe as one body, listen as one body, chant as one body, transcending the boundaries of a delusive self, liberating us from the superiority complex, the inferiority complex, and the equality complex.
The heart of perfect understanding, the Bodhisattva Avalokita, while moving in the deep cause of perfect understanding, shed light on the five skandhas and found them equally empty. After this penetration, he overcame ill being. Listen, Shariputra, form is emptiness, and emptiness is form. Form is not other than emptiness. Emptiness is not other than form. The same is true with feelings, perceptions, mental formations, and consciousness. Listen, Shariputra, all dhammas are marked with emptiness. They are neither produced nor destroyed, neither defiled nor immaculate, neither increasing nor decreasing. Therefore in emptiness there is neither form, nor feelings, nor perceptions, nor mental formations, nor consciousness, no eye or ear or nose or tongue or body or mind, no form, no sound, no smell, no taste, no touch, no object of mind, no ranks of elements from eyes to mind consciousness, no interdependent origins and no extinction of them, from ignorance to death and decay, no ill-being, no cause of ill-being, no end of ill-being, and no path, no understanding, and no attainment. Because there is no attainment, the Bodhisattvas, grounded in perfect understanding, find no obstacles for their minds. Having no obstacles, they overcome fear, liberating themselves forever from illusion, realizing perfect nirvana. All Buddhas in the past, present, and future, thanks to this perfect understanding, arrive at full and bright universal enlightenment. Therefore one should know that perfect understanding is the highest mantra, the unequal mantra, the destroyer of your being, the incorruptible truth. A mantra of Prajnaparamita should therefore be proclaimed. Gate, gate, para samgate, bodhi swaha, gate, gate, para samgate, bodhi swaha, gate, gate, para samgate, bodhi swaha. morning meditation, and for reciting the sutras. May this practice center with its fourfold Sangha be supported by the three jewels and holy beings, well protected from the 8 misfortunes and the 3 paths of suffering. May parents, teachers, friends, and all beings within the 3 realms be filled with the most divine grace, and may it be found that in the world there is no place at war. May the winds be favorable, the rain seasonable, and the people's hearts at peace. May the practice of the noble community, diligent and steady, ascend the 10 Bodhisattva stages with ease and energy. May the Sangha body live peacefully, fresh and full of joy, a refuge for all, offering happiness and insight. The wisdom of the awakened mind shines out like the full moon. The body of the awakened one is pure and clear as crystal. In the world the awakened one relieves bitterness and suffering. In every place the awakened mind
The English-speaking children, please come. Good morning, dear friends, everyone here. Good evening, dear friends. Today is the 14th of August, right? In the year 2013, and we are in Brook University on our 4th day of the retreat, Happy Teachers Go Change the World. Today we shall do a little meditation. This morning, during sitting meditation, we meditated a little bit about a cloud and water. When you look into this cup of tea, of course you see the tea. But to meditate means to have the time to look more deeply. And if you look deeply into the tea, you can see the cloud. You can see a cloud. I think everyone here is able to see a cloud in the tea, right? This tea has former lives. In one of her former lives, it was a cloud. Just 4 days ago, it was in the sky as a cloud, floating, having a good time up there. And then one day, it died and became the rain. The cloud died in order to give place to the rain. And then you think that the rain has also died, the rain died and give place to the tea. And in a few minutes, the tea will die in order to give place to a Dharma talk. So we can look into the tea and talk to the cloud. The cloud has not really died. It has not died. It was transformed. It's transformed simply into the rain. Snow dying. There's only transformation, changing. That is good news. Nothing can die. I don't know how many children are born in the city of Toronto every day. We have to ask the mayor. Or maybe we have to ask Google. And we know that many people die in the city of Toronto every day. We don't know how many will die today. So when something dies, when someone dies, we suffer. We are sorrowful. But if we practice meditation, we look deeply, we see that nothing can die. They only transform themselves into something else. It's impossible for a cloud to die. To die means to become nothing. But can a cloud become nothing? No, it's impossible. A cloud can become the rain, the snow, or the ice, but a cloud can never become nothing. The same thing is true with everything else, including a person. A person cannot die. She can transform herself into someone else, something else, but she cannot die. And if we practice meditation, we can see things like that, very deep. So, shall we look into the tea and say, hello, my little cloud, I know you are there in the tea. I know that you have not died. It's impossible for you to die. You simply transform yourself into the rain. And now the rain has transformed itself into the tea. So hello my cloud, hello my rain, I know you are there in the tea. And when I look at the tea, I see the cloud, I see the rain. The next time when you eat an ice cream, do some meditation. Looking into the ice cream, there is a cloud inside. And when we practice meditation, looking deeply, we see that in the appearance there is birth and death. But looking deeply, there is no birth and no death. And some of the scientists, they have found the same thing. Nothing can die. There's a French gentleman whose name is Lavoisier. He said, rien ne se crée, rien ne se perd. Nothing can be born, nothing can die. So this is the meditation on the tea. I show you something else. This is a circle Thai drawn with Chinese ink. And you know something? There is a cloud inside the circle. There is also tea in the circle. difficult? No. Because when Thầy does calligraphy, he always mix some tea with his Chinese ink. And that is why when you look deeply into the ink, you see the tea inside. And if the tea is inside, the cloud is inside also. And this is the truth. Because every time Thầy does calligraphy, he begins to have some tea. He drinks some tea. And then he pours some of the tea into the Chinese ink, he mixes, and he begins to draw a circle or to write. So in this circle, there is tea. And this is the truth. You know, the tea leaves were discovered first by Buddhist monks. Because they found that when they drink tea, they are able to stay awake, so they don't sleep during meditation, sitting meditation. So the tea has been with the practitioner of meditation for a long time. Generations of practitioners of meditation have been drinking tea to help them stay awake during sitting meditation. And the monk did not put milk or sugar in the tea. It's not authentic. But later on, people want to taste better. That is why they put milk and sugar cream into the tea. But the tea Thầy used to mix with the ink has no sugar in it, has no cream or milk in it. And I tell you another secret. When he began to draw a circle, he began to breathe in. He took about 3 seconds to breathe in. And he begins here. And he breathes in 1 second, 3 seconds, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. He came to this place. And his in-breath is ended here. And then he began to breathe out. And it takes more time to breathe out. It's about 5 seconds in order for him to join this starting point. That's the way Thầy does calligraphy. Breathing in mindfully, breathing out mindfully. So you do not see only the tea in the circle, but you see his in-breath and out-breath. That is a secret. And usually when Thầy breathes in, he concentrates on his in-breath. And when he breathes it out, he concentrates on his out-breath. And he may like to smile during the out-breath to relax his body. There's no tension at all when he draws a circle. Very nice. This is a form of meditation. Drawing a circle, writing, calligraphy is a practice of meditation. And you have peace, you have joy, you have communion with the cosmos during the time you do meditation. From time to time, he invites all the cells in his body to join him in making the circle. Like yesterday, he did like that. he invited all the cells in his body to join him and draw the circle. They draw the circle together, not a person. That's very nice. Everyone is collaborating into making the circle. And there were times when they invited the whole Sangha, his disciples, monks and nuns and lay disciples, to join him in drawing a circle. So don't believe that this circle is drawn by one person alone. We as a community, we have drawn this circle together. So you can see the Sangha, you can see Thay's disciple in this. Sometimes he invited his teacher, because Thay has a teacher, to draw the circle with him. And sometimes he invited all his ancestors to draw the circle with him. So during the time he draw circle, he practices calligraphy, he's in touch with his ancestors, friends, disciples, the ink, the tea, the cloud, the rain, everything. It's very nice to practice calligraphy, because this is one form of meditation. It gives you so much joy and peace. You like to practice calligraphy? You like to try drawing a circle while breathing in and out? We have the time to do that today. Okay? So when you hear the small bell, please stand up and salute the Sangha before you continue outside. Okay? Have a good time. We know that the first Dhamma talk the Buddha gave is on the Four Noble Truths, and that contains the whole of the Buddha's teaching. And the first Noble Truth is about suffering. Buddhism is very pragmatic, and the existence of ill being dukkha is ill being, suffering, and suffering is described as a noble truth. And someone may ask the question, what is so noble about suffering? In fact, that when we look deeply into the truth of suffering, we can discover other truths. Because we know that suffering is connected with happiness. Suffering is the other side of happiness. It's like the left is on the other side of the right. And we know that this is because that is. And that is the teaching of Buddha on Genesis. This is because that is. This, if this is not, and then that cannot be. It's so simple. And we can use the term interbeing in order to describe that teaching. You cannot be by yourself alone. You have to interbe with the other side. The left cannot be by herself alone. The left has to interbe with the right. The above with the below. The inside with the outside. Birth and death. Being and non-being. They cannot be without each other. They always be. They are together. And that is why the word interbeing is better. The other day, when we spoke about a flower, we saw that a flower cannot be by herself alone. A flower has to interbe with non-flower elements. And if you remove non-flower elements, there is no flower left. So interbeing is the truth. You cannot be by yourself alone. You have to interbe with the whole cosmos. So when you confirm the existence of ill being, you have to confirm at the same time the opposite of ill being. Ill being cannot be by herself alone. Like the right cannot be by herself alone, it has to interbe with the left. So if ill being is there, something is there also, that is well-being. And well-being, that is the third noble truth. Logically speaking, if ill being is there, and then well-being must be there somewhere. And in the scripture, well-being is described as the cessation of ill being. The cessation of ill being means the presence of well-being, the same thing. Just like the absence of darkness means the presence of light. When God say, let the light be, and the light say, I have to wait, my Lord. And God said, what are you waiting for? I wait for darkness so that we will manifest together. And God said, but darkness is already there. And light said, in that case, I am already there. That is the truth of interbeing. So when you confirm the existence of ill being, you have to confirm at the same time the truth of well-being, like the left and the right. And when you look deeply into the nature of ill being, you discover the second truth, which is the way of life that has brought ill being to you. You see the roots of ill being, you see the causes of ill being, you see the way of life, you see the path leading to ill being. And if you don't look into ill being, you cannot see the second noble truth, which is the path leading to ill being. Suppose someone has a depression. That depression is ill being. And if he or she has the time to look deeply into her depression, she will find out how that ill being has come to be. You must have lived in such a way in the last six months or 1 year, so that the depression has become a reality. So looking into the first noble truth, you see the second noble truth, the path leading to ill being, to suffering. And the Buddha said this, what has come to be, namely ill being, what has come to be, if you know how to look deeply into its nature and discover the sort of nutriment you have used in order to bring it in, you are already on the path of emancipation. And the Buddha spoke on the second noble truth in terms of nutriment, food. We can speak of the second noble truth in terms of path, the path leading to ill being, the way of life that lead to ill being, to suffering. But in the Buddhist tradition, very often we speak of the second noble truth in terms of food, in terms of nutriment. And the Buddha declared that nothing can survive without food, including your ill being. If you deprive your ill being with food, your ill being will die. If your depression continues because you keep feeding your depression. And if you look into your depression and find out the kind of nutriment you have used to feed your depression, you are already on the path of emancipation. That is why the first noble truth is noble, because when you look into it, you can discover the other truth, including the truth of well-being, including the truth of the path leading to well-being. Your love, which is so beautiful, so precious, if you don't know how to feed it, it will die. It will turn into something else like anger or hate. Nothing can survive without food. Your suffering also, your anger. If your anger continues because you continue to feed your anger, and if you cut off the source of nutriment feeding your anger will have to die. And that is why the Buddha said, nothing can survive without food. And well-being also needs nutriments in order to survive. Happiness. Your love, your happiness, your joy cannot survive without food. And if you have love, if you have happiness, you must learn how to feed your love, your happiness, so that it will not die. And if there is a path leading to ill-being, and then there is also a path leading to well-being. And the Four Noble Truths can be explained as simply as this. This path is called noble path. It begins by right view. It is called a noble path because it leads to well-being. But the other path, it does not lead to well-being, it leads to ill-being. It's not a noble path, it is an ignoble path. And when we see the path leading to ill-being, you see at the same time the path leading to well-being, because this path is in the opposite direction. It's so easy, so simple. If the path leading to well-being begins with right view, and then the path leading to ill-being begins with wrong view. Wrong views because you do not have the time to look deeply, and you have wrong perceptions about yourself, about the world, about everything. Let us today talk about the four kinds of nutriments. It has to do with the fifth mindfulness trainings. The five mindfulness trainings are a very concrete expression of the Noble Eightfold Path, the path leading to well-being, the path leading to the cessation of ill-being, the way out. And the fifth mindfulness training is about mindful consumption. Unmindful consumption will lead to ill-being, and mindful consumption will lead to well-being. So the fifth mindfulness training is the way out for our society, the society of consumption. There is a sutra very well known, the Sutra of the Sun's Flesh, talking about the four kinds of nutriments. The Buddha began by telling a story of a young couple of refugees. The story must have been a true story told by the Buddha by that young couple of refugees. They tried to flee the country with their little boy. And they had to cross a desert. But they have not well calculated That is why halfway to the desert, they run out of food. And they knew that all of them, 3 of them, are going to die. Were going to die. There's no hope to go to the other country to seek refuge. So finally they decided to kill the little boy and eat the flesh with the hope to survive and get out of the desert. It's a terrible kind of decision. And each of them ate a piece of that flesh every day and kept the rest of the body to dry on that shoulder. And every day after having eaten 1 piece of that flesh, they cry, "Where is now our beloved little boy?" And they pull their hair, they beat their chest, and they suffer. But finally, they got out of the desert and was accepted as refugees. And the Buddha, after having told the story to his monks, asked them, "My dear friends, do you think that the couple enjoy eating their son's flesh?" And the monk said, "No, dear teacher, it's impossible to enjoy eating one's own son's flesh." The Buddha said, "In that case, we should eat in such a way that can retain compassion in our heart. Otherwise, we'll be eating the flesh of our sons and daughters." And this is about the first kind of nutriment, edible food. We know that tens of thousands of children die every day in the world because of the lack of nutrition and food. And we have been using the amount of grain that we have grown in order to make alcohol and meat. We cut the forest, we pollute the air, the water, we destroy many forms of life in order to have a piece of meat to eat, a glass of alcohol to drink that is equal to eating the flesh of our children and drinking the blood of our children. And if we continue like that, there will be no compassion left in our heart. And without compassion, we cannot relate to another living being. We cannot be a happy person. That is why mindful eating helps us to protect life, to preserve understanding and compassion in our heart, so that we can be a happy person. And we have learned from scientists that if we can reduce the eating of meat and the drinking of alcohol by 50%, we can already change the world. Eating meat is more polluting than driving a car. That's what we have learned. And we can help protect our environment. In Buddhist countries like Vietnam, many practitioners eat vegetarian 10 days a month. So it's easy to urge them to add 5 more days. And I have made such an appeal to the Buddhists in Vietnam to increase the number of vegetarian days. So please think about that. Nourish our compassion and our happiness. So the first source of nutriment is edible food, đoàn thực. The second source of nutriment is sensory impression. Sense impression. We have 6 sense organs: eyes, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind consciousness. And we consume with our eyes, our ear, our nose, our body, and our consciousness. We consume the internet, we consume music, we consume television, we consume magazines, books, conversations. And many of the items we consume are highly toxic. Even a conversation may be full of hate, anger, and fear, and despair. And if we listen to 1 hour, we got a lot of toxins. We have to protect ourselves. We have to protect our children. So we should sit down as a family, as a community, to discuss a strategy of consumption. And if you are in the city council, you may like to invite other members of your council to discuss about protecting the citizen in your city and the children in your city, because many of them are intoxicating themselves by the consumption, by that kind of consumption, sensory impressions. Our children watch television several hours a day. And we know that there are many programs of television that are full of violence, anger, and fear. And our children continue to ingest these kind of toxins into themselves. So there must be a kind of Dharma sharing, Dharma discussion in the family, in the city council, in order to protect ourselves and protect our children. Physical health, mental health, and the health of our society, the health of our planet. For this second source of nutriment, the Buddha has used the image of a cow with skin disease. That cow has serious skin disease, and she almost has no skin anymore. When she lie down, all the insects come and suck the blood. When she came close to a old well, the insects in that come out and suck the blood. And when she goes to the water, the mini creature, tiny creatures came and sucked the blood. So she has no way to protect herself because she has no skin. So if we do not have mindfulness of consumption, we have no skin to protect ourselves. We allowed these sensory impressions to penetrate into our body and out to our mind and intoxicate. When you drive through the city, even if you don't want to consume, you consume anyway. the advertisement, the music, and what you hear, you see, are items of consumption. So, if we are a legislator, we should meditate on that. We should try to protect our people. We should prevent other people to get rich by producing the kind of products that intoxicate us and intoxicate our children. They cannot, in the name of freedom, intoxicate us and poison us by their product. Even film, magazines and books and music and electronic games and so on. We should have a national debate on this problem. If we want to really to preserve the health of our nation, our people. And if you are journalists, educators, please meditate on this, write an article and teach about mindful consumption. It's very important. The third kind of nutriment is called volition. Tư niệm thực. Xúc thực. This is the deepest kind of desire of a person. That is food. What we want to do with our life. There are many other kind of desire. Desire to have money, to have more comfort, to have fame, to have power, and so on. But what is your deepest desire? What do you want to do with your life? That is a desire. And if you have such a strong desire, you have a lot of energy. A person who has no desire has no energy. The Buddha also had desire to get enlightened, to get free, to help many people. That is a wholesome desire. That is good volition. A terrorist has also deep desire to punish, maybe in the name of God. To kill, to destroy, to punish. And that kind of desire may be based on anger, fear, fanaticism, wrong perceptions. And we have been fitting our deepest desire by this kind of views and afflictions. So the desire to revenge, to kill, to destroy is evolution, but it's not good food. If you have the desire to protect children, to protect the environment, and that is a good volition. So everyone should have the time to sit down and identify his or her deepest desire. And to find out whether that desire is constructive or destructive. If your desire is to run after craving, the objects of your craving, like money, sex, power, fame, you might destroy your body and your mind by by these kind of volitions. There are so many of us who have plenty of these four things: power, fame, wealth, and sex, but they suffer very deeply. They destroy themselves, and they destroy other people and the environment. And that is not good volition. So volition is another source of nutriment, of food, and we should sit down, identify our deepest desire. In the Buddhist tradition, there is that intention to practice, to transform yourself, transform your afflictions, to have more compassion and understanding, to help people suffer less. That's called the mind of enlightenment, bodhicitta, which is a very good kind of volition. And if you have the equivalent of that, you are a happy person, and your life is useful to humanity and other living beings. And the fourth source of nutriment is called consciousness. Consciousness as food. Tuk tuk. First of all, our individual consciousness. Each of us has our individual consciousness, mental consciousness, and store consciousness. In our store consciousness, there may be a dark spot. Maybe we have been abused as a child in the past. We have suffered quite a lot as a child. And the memories of suffering are still there, very vivid. And it is in that corner of our store consciousness. And also that kind of suffering may have been transmitted to us by our parents, our ancestors. And many of us have the habit of going back to the past and suffer again and again the suffering of the past. We don't follow the teaching of the Buddha that the past is already gone. We should be able to enjoy the wonders of life in the present moment. But many of us cannot do that because the past has become a kind of prison. We are caught. And we go back always to the past and relive again and again the suffering of the past. There are films of the past projected in that dark corner, and we go back day and night and watch the film of suffering in the past. We need someone like a teacher or a friend to try to take us out of that dark corner of our consciousness. There are animals like cows and buffaloes. After they have eaten grass, they swallow. They have so many stomachs. They chew, they swallow, and then they bring it out again, and they chew again. So we do exactly like that. We swallow our suffering, and we bring it up again, and we swallow again and again. And that is not good food. Not consciousness as as food. The materials in our individual consciousness should be recognized and transformed, and should not continue to be a source of nutriment for us. And as a practitioner, we have to be aware of that. We should stop consuming the past, consuming the suffering of the past. We should try to be in the here and the now, profit from the light, from the beauty of the cosmos, of the earth, to nourish us, to help us strong in order to transform, eliminate that corner, dark corner in our consciousness. You need a friend, a teacher, a sangha, maybe a psychotherapist to help you to get out of that prison and learn to live deeply in the present moment, to heal. And then there is the collective consciousness. Collective consciousness can be very wholesome. Like when we come to a retreat like this, and 1,300 people breathing together, smiling together, working together, we produce a very wholesome energy of peace and joy. And that is a very good nutriment, very good food. Last year, while giving a Dhamma talk in northern Germany, I saw 4 young mothers sitting in the front row and nursing their babies. Of course, the baby did not understand the talk. But they they benefit from the peaceful, loving atmosphere in the home. They were receiving 2 kinds of food at the same time, the milk from the mother's breast and the atmosphere of peace and brotherhood and sisterhood generated by the practice in the home. So as a Sangha, we can produce that kind of collective, wholesome energy of peace and compassion that can help to heal and to transform. That is why building a Sangha is a very noble thing to do. After the retreat, maybe you would like to go home with the intention, volition, to build a Sangha. To do walking, sitting, breathing, to generate that collective energy of peace and brotherhood. And many people in the neighborhood can come and inherit from that. But there are neighborhoods who are full of anger and fear and hate. And the collective energy of anger and despair is so destructive. If you happen to spend a few days in that neighborhood, you feel that you suffer. And if you happen to settle in that neighborhood, you should know that you have to pull out as quickly as possible. Otherwise, you will be like them, thinking, acting in a hateful way, in a violent way, and your children will do that. Not because we want to abandon the suffering people, but we have to take care of ourselves first. We have to pull out and heal ourselves. And if we can go back in strength as a Sangha, we can help that neighborhood to transform. You know, the collective energy of hate, of anger, of fear is very destructive. It leads to killing. It leads to committing suicide. On the day of September 11th, I was in America on a speaking tour. We had to offer retreats and Dhamma talks. And I felt that collective energy of anger and fear in America. It's so dangerous. So the first public talk I gave was 3 days after September 11 in Berkeley. 4,000 people attended. And as I asked all members of the monastic sangha to join me and help the crowd to practice calming, because the feeling of anger and fear is so overwhelming. We practice breathing, calming. We know that reacting with that kind of consciousness, collective consciousness of fear and anger is very dangerous. And a number of days later, I gave another talk at the Riverside Church in New York City and encourage people to practice the same kind of practice, calming down. When I boarded the plane to go to another city, I could feel the anger and the fear of everyone sitting in the plane. And the pilot tried to say something to cheer people up, but he did not succeed. And that is why we should not allow ourselves to consume that collective energy of fear, anger, and despair. It's not good for our health, and not good for the health of our children. If that neighborhood produces so much hate and despair and anger, we should not continue to be there, because if we do, it will be like them very quickly, our children also. That is why we have to learn to protect ourselves and try our best to come back to help when we are stronger. This is the 4 kinds of nutriments that the Buddha spoke about. And I have a friend who is in the faculty of the Department of Nutrition in Harvard University. She wrote a book, Savor, on eating, mindful eating. And I advise her to print the text, the whole text of the sutra inside. Mindful consumption is the way out. And this is a national problem. It's a world problem, not only a family problem. We know that the 5 mindfulness trainings represent the Noble Eightfold Path, a path of happiness and joy and love. And if we live according to the 5 trainings, we can experience happiness, joy, and compassion every day. And the path begins with right view. Right view is a kind of insight, the kind of wisdom that is free from any kind of discrimination. The Buddha spoke very often about right view, because right view is a foundation of all kinds of actions. Based on right view, you have right thinking, you have right speech, and right action that can promote peace and happiness. But how to have right view? And we know that the practice of mindfulness, the practice of concentration always lead to right view. This is right concentration. And another energy is related to that, that is the energy of mindfulness. And we know already that the energy of mindfulness carries within itself the energy of concentration and insight. And sometimes insight can come very quickly. If you have the list of mental formations, and if you look into the 5 particulars, you see that the 5 particulars are intention, determination, mindfulness, concentration, and insight. You have the name in Chinese and Sanskrit. This is Smriti, this is Samadhi, this is Mati or Prajna. We know that mindfulness is a kind of energy that helps us to be aware of what is going on in our body, in our feelings, in our perceptions, and in the objects of our perceptions. The energy of mindfulness helps us to be fully present in the here and the now, so that we can get in touch with the wonders of life that can nourish us and heal us. And mindfulness always helps increase concentration, and together mindfulness and concentration can bring insight. And insight are of many layers, and insight can be obtained very quickly. When you breathe in mindfully, and if you concentrate on your in-breath, you may find out very simple things, like you are alive. I breathe in, and I find out that I am alive, that I have a body. I know I have a body that is already an insight. I'm alive, I'm fully present in the here and the now, that is an insight. Breathing in, I know I am alive. And to be alive is a miracle. It is the greatest of all miracles to be alive. And it's so simple. As you breathe in, you know that you are alive. Because someone who is already dead, she cannot breathe in anymore. As you breathe in, you know that you are alive. And when you breathe out, you can already celebrate the fact that you are still alive. Your lungs are still strong enough to enjoy your in-breath. Your feet are strong enough to touch the earth with every step. So many conditions of happiness are available. So insight continue to come like that with mindfulness and concentration. Breathing in, I know I'm aware of my eyes, and I find out that my eyes are still in good conditions. Breathing in, I'm aware of my heart, and the insight is that my heart still functions normally. So insights are not something very far away. You can get many of them right in the present moment with the energy of mindfulness and concentration. And you go deeper and deeper thanks to mindfulness and concentration. One day, a monk whose name is Katyayana came to ask the Buddha, "Dear teacher, you often speak about right view. What is right view exactly?" And that day the Buddha said, "Well, right view is a kind of insight that transcends the notion of being and non-being." And this statement is found in a very famous sutra, which is short but very important. Let us visualize time as something that flows from left to right. And let us suppose that this point is called B, birth. Someone is born here and is going to die there. When you give rise to the notion of birth, the other notion is born at the same time, death. Interbeing. Birth cannot be without death, and death cannot be without birth. Interbeing. So this is our way of thinking. The usual way of thinking. That to be born means from nothing you become something. From no one you become someone. That is our thinking. And that kind of thinking is described by Buddha as wrong thinking. Meanwhile, basing on right view, your thinking is called right thinking. Our thinking is that before point B, you do not exist. You belong to the realm of non-being. So the segment ending with B represents non-being. And the segment beginning with B represents being. And you continue to be until you come to a point called D, death. That's the way a majority of us think. And when you come to point D, you cease to be. And you pass from being into non-being again. And this kind of thinking is not right thinking. Because according to the Buddha on that day, right thinking is the kind of insight that transcends the notion of being and non-being. And when we meditate on a cloud, we see that the reality of a cloud transcends the notion of birth and death, being and non-being. A cloud has not come from non-being. This is very clear, easy to see. A cloud has not come from non-being. A cloud has come from the water in the ocean, the steam, the heat generated by the sun. It's like the sheet of paper. Before she expressed herself as a sheet of paper, she had been the trees in the forest. So we can see her former life while we look at her. So the sheet of paper has not come from nothing. So there is no birth, only a transformation. A transformation from water, from steam into the cloud. So the true nature of the cloud is the nature of no birth. Birth is only on the surface. There is no birth, there is only a transformation from one form into another form. And then when the cloud becomes the rain, it's not death. Yes, because to die means from something you become nothing. But a cloud cannot become nothing. Cloud changes her form into the rain, into the snow. So there is no death. And it's interesting enough to see that some of our scientists agree with that. Lavoisier said nothing is created, nothing died. Rien ne se crée, rien ne se perd. He was not a Buddhist practitioner, but he practiced meditation his own way. He found the nature of no birth and no death, of energy and matter. And we know that the first law of thermodynamics is that you cannot create matter, you cannot destroy matter. You cannot create energy, you cannot destroy energy. You can transfer. When transform matter into another kind of matter, matter into energy, energy into another kind of energy, energy back into matter, but their nature is the nature of no birth and no death. And if we apply that into our thinking about life, our personal life, we may transcend the fear of birth and death. And the nature of no birth and no death applied is seen in matter and energy. And we, the person, the human person, is also matter and energy. So looking into a cloud, we see that birth and death are only the appearance. Looking deeply, we see the nature of the cloud as nature of no birth and no death. And deep thinking, deep reflection help remove the notion of birth and death. Rien ne se crée, rien ne se perd. And practitioners of meditation and scientists can work hands in hands and try to work together. And if the couple, birth and death, the pair of opposite, birth and death, are removed, And then the notion of being and non-being are removed at the same time. Because if there is no death, no birth, and then there is no being and no non-being, the notion of being and non-being cannot be applied to reality. Because we believe that to be born is from non-being, we pass into the realm of being, and to die from the realm of being into the realm of non-being again. And that is why that day the Buddha told Katyayana, right view is the kind of wisdom, the kind of insight that transcends the notion of birth, of being and non-being. There are four basic kinds of opposites: birth and death, being and non-being, sameness and otherness, coming and going. There are many pairs of opposite, but these four pairs represents all the other pairs of opposite. There is another pair of opposite which is very important, which is subject and object. And many of our scientists are still caught in the notion of object and subject as the things can exist outside of each other. And even in the realm of neuroscience, many people continue to think dualistically of consciousness and nature. Consciousness is something subjective in here, and trying to reach out to understand nature out there. So there is the subject and the object as two separate things. There is the inside and the outside as two separate things, and that is still caught in the dualistic thinking. Two pairs of opposite: inside, outside, subject and object. So right thinking on our left is the thinking that is free from all these discrimination, these pairs of opposite: birth and death, being and non-being, coming and going, the same sameness and otherness. I think we have to say something about this to make it clearer. When you look into the family album, you see your picture as a 5-year-old girl. You see your picture as a 5-year-old boy. And you may ask, am I the same person with that little boy or little girl? You are not the same, because you look so different. Your form, your feelings, your perceptions, your mental formation, your consciousness are quite different from the 5 elements of the little girl, little boy. And yet you are not another person. So are you the same with that little boy, little girl, or you are a completely different person? So the notion of sameness and otherness should be removed. The truth lies somewhere in between. And in Buddhism, we use the word the middle way that transcends the pairs of opposite, including birth, death, being, non-being, sameness and otherness. And coming and going. Cho thầy xin cái hộp quẹt. We are thinking about the flame. And do you think that the flame now belongs to the realm of being or non-being? Do you think that it belongs to the realm of non-being? Since it has not manifested to us, that it belongs to the realm of non-being? I know that the little flame is hidden somewhere. Not only inside of the box, but outside. Outside here there is oxygen, and without oxygen as an important condition, a flame cannot manifest. So the flame is already there, hidden in many of its conditions. And my two fingers can be one of the last conditions in order to invite the flame to manifest. Dear little flame, why don't you show yourself, manifest for us? Dear Thầy, dear Sangha, I'm ready, but I need the last condition, a movement of your fingers. Here we can see the flame manifested. And we believe that it now belongs to the realm of being. Before the manifestation, it belonged to the realm of non-being. We are caught in these two terms. And the expression interbeing can be helpful. It can help us remove the notion of being and non-being. There are theologians who describe God as the ground of being, like Paul Tillich. And we may like to ask, dear Mr. Tillich, if God is the ground of being, and then who will be the ground of non-being? You cannot describe God in terms of being or non-being, because God, the absolute, the ultimate, transcends the notions of being and non-being. To be or not to be, that is not the question. Now should we ask, my dear little flame, where are you gone? Where have you gone? Where have you come from? And where have you gone? I miss you. We miss you. And if you listen, you can hear the answer. Dear Thầy, dear Sangha, I have come from nowhere. I have not come from Italy. I have not come from Sweden. I have not come from the north, the south, the east, and the west. When conditions are sufficient, I manifest myself. My nature is no coming. My nature is non-local. And we know that the flame has told the truth. Her nature is no coming. There was a 9-year-old girl who came from the Netherlands to our summer retreat in Plum Village. And she was so good a practitioner. She played, she helped many other children. And the sisters in the New Hamlet invite her to come next year to help. She will not have to pay anything. And he said, how many weeks do I have to spend here? The nun said, 4 weeks, because the summer opening is 4 weeks. And she said that I have only 6 weeks of vacation. But the nun said, well, here you only play, you don't do anything. Where are you from? I'm from the Netherlands, but speaking in Thai's way, I have come from nowhere. The children in the Dharma talk, they receive a lot of teaching. We think that they don't pay attention, but they understand a lot of things. Dear, my dear little flame, where have you gone? I miss you. Now we ask that question when one of our beloved one is no longer in her usual form. We cry. We spend time grieving. We need meditation to suffer less, to get out of our despair. Dear beloved one, where have you gone? I miss you. And the flame say, dear Thai Sangha, I have not gone anywhere. When conditions are sufficient, I manifest. And when conditions are no longer sufficient, I just stop my manifestation, waiting for conditions to manifest again in other forms. And that is the truth. And there are 4 pairs of opposite that represent many pairs of opposite. Birth and death, being and non-being, sameness and otherness, coming and going. And right view is a kind of view that transcends all these notions. And when you transcend the notion of birth and death, being and non-being, you are free from any kind of fear and discrimination. That is why any thought that you produce based on that right view is right thinking. And good practitioners are capable of producing thoughts like that several times a day in the line, the direction of right thinking, full of understanding, free from discrimination, full of compassion. And as you produce a thought of understanding and love, that thought begins to heal you and begin to heal the world. Right thinking, that is good practice. You don't need anything. You don't need money or electronic device. You don't need anything. With that kind of right view, you can produce thoughts full of understanding and love that have the power to heal you and heal the world. If someone produces a thought full of hate and despair, that will destroy himself and destroy the world. A thought of anger and despair can lead someone to suicide, committing suicide, or to go and kill someone. But a thought produced on the ground of right view is always full of understanding and compassion, and has the power to heal us and heal the world. And then next to right thinking, you have right speech. Chánh ngữ. Right speech and deep listening, compassionate listening. This is the practice of the 4th mindfulness training. And we already learned that the practice of compassionate listening and loving speech can restore communication and bring about reconciliation in a few hours or 4 or 5 days of practice. And when we listen deeply and with compassion, we can help heal the other person. We can restore communication. I think children now, in our time, they suffer a lot. And because they suffer, adults have to suffer also. If you are a school teacher, you cannot, you have to suffer. You have to suffer because the students in your class are full of suffering. Some of the children have come from broken families, and nobody has understood them. Nobody has listened to them. So if we can bring that kind of practice into school, it will help heal the children and also heal the teacher. In order to succeed in our task of teaching and learning, we have to economize our energy. Because if we suffer like that, we lose a lot of energy. And you do not have enough energy to teach and to learn. And that is why sessions of deep listening can be organized in school. And the administration of the school should understand this. The teacher has suffering in himself or herself. And the students, every one of them have suffering. And if we can sit down and listen to each other, the students should know the difficulties and suffering of the teacher. And after they have learned that, their behavior will change. And the teacher should be able to listen, to sit down and listen to the suffering of the students. And the whole class can practice sitting down and breathe and listen to each other. That will not a loss of time. That will create a mutual understanding. And they will be able to collaborate with each other in making the learning and the teaching more pleasant, a joy for both teachers and students. I think a Dharma discussion should be organized on this matter. The fourth mindfulness training, deep listening, compassionate listening, and loving speech can be very well practiced in school, so that mutual understanding will be possible between students and teachers, and then we can save a lot of energy for the sake of learning and teaching. When you write a letter, that is right speech. If you write a letter full of understanding and compassion, the healing is taking place right while you are writing the letter. You feel wonderful, you feel light, you feel healed if you can write a letter of full of understanding and compassion and forgiveness. The other person has not read the letter, but the letter already has an effect on you. And the practice of the fourth mindfulness training, loving speech, and deep listening can help reconcile and bring peace and reconciliation, communication. And right speech is, of course, free of all kind of discrimination and fear and anger, because it is based on the insight of interbeing. And now come the right action. This is the kind of action taken by our body. Anything we do with our body that can help protect, save, support is called right action. We protect lives, we protect the environment, we preserve life, and these are three aspects of our action. In Buddhism, we have the word karma, which means action, nghiệp. Triple karma. Your action is triple. Your thinking, your speaking, and your acting. And nothing is lost. This is the kind of energy that you produce every day. A thought that you produce is energy. It will not be lost. If yesterday it happened that you have produced a thought of anger, and you know that it would not be profiting for yourself and for the world, and today with enlightenment, you sit down and produce another thought in the line of right thinking, full of compassion, full of understanding. And if you produce such a thought, it will transform the thought of yesterday, neutralize it, delete it some way, and you have a power over the past. You can change the past by making good use of the present moment. And you get the healing. So any thought that you produce will have an effect in the future. Anything you say or write down will continue to be there as energy. Everything you do also karma. That is your continuation. When your body disintegrates, you continue always. You cannot die. It's impossible for you to die. You continue always. And you can assure a better continuation, a more beautiful continuation by producing thoughts, speech, and action in the line of right thinking, right speech, and right action. This action, this karma, is you and not this body. There is a French writer, philosopher, his name is Jean-Paul Sartre. He said something very close to it. L'homme est la somme de ses actes. Man is the totality of his action. Man is not this body, these feelings, but the action that will last for a long time, that will be revealed in other forms, like a cloud that has acid in it will produce acid rain. So if our thinking, our speech, and our action are full of compassion and understanding, and then we will have a beautiful continuation. You cannot die. You continue always. Rien ne se perd. Therefore, with the practice of mindfulness and concentration, you can get the deepest insight that is called insight of interbeing, transcending the notion of birth and death, being and non-being. And therefore, every thought you produce, everything that you say, every act that you do will bring only happiness and well-being to you and to the world. And this is the first 6 elements of the 4 of the Noble Eightfold Path. And two other elements which is right livelihood, tánh mạng. The kind of job, the kind of career that you take up, the way you earn your life should reflect the inside of inner being, and therefore is not harming to other species and harming to the environment. And finally, you have right chánh cần, right diligence. Cần biết sao rồi. This we have learned already. That is the practice of selective watering. You water the good seed in you, you water the good seed in her, in him, and you refrain from watering the negative seed in you and in him. And this is the path called the Noble Path, presented by the 5 mindfulness trainings. And one thing that should be said concerning this, the third noble truth, which is well-being, and the fourth noble truth is the path of well-being. It is better to say the path of well-being than to say the path leading to well-being. Because this is a dualistic thinking. This is the goal, well-being. And this is the path. And you might think that you have to suffer on the path in order to begin to experience well-being when you arrive. That is not right thinking. There is no way to happiness. Happiness is the way. There is no nirvana. Nirvana is the way. Because with strong mindfulness and concentration, you can touch the inside of nirvana with every step. The nature of no birth and no death. No being and no non-being. Nirvana is available in the here and the now. The true nature of everything is nirvana. No birth, no death, no being, no non-being. And if you touch nirvana, fear is no longer there. Anger is no longer there. There is no way to nirvana. Nirvana is the way. There is no way to happiness. Happiness is the way. You should be happy while breathing in. You should be happy while breathing out. You should be happy while doing the dishes. When you should be happy while defecating or urinating. Happiness is possible at any time of the day with insight. And insight is possible with mindfulness and concentration. You are already what you want to become. You belong to the kingdom of God. You belong to the realm of, to the pure land of the Buddha. And that is the practice of aimlessness that we will talk about in our Dhamma talk, in our next Dhamma talk after tomorrow. Tomorrow we have a session of questions and answers.